Chapter 11. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Only Jean acknowledged it. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Holding George's hand, Jean stood there and eavesdropped on the women's conversation. She was not concerned by what the ladies said. George looked up to his mother and asked, "Are they talking about us?" Jean shrugged. She had learned to tolerate trivial matters but be strong when it came to taking revenge. She used to care about what people said about her, but she got smarter now. "Come on, let's go get you some desserts," Jean said. George had a look at the chatty women. He had a youthful look of a 6-year-old, but there was a hint of gloom in his eyes that did not match his age. They walked to the table with the desserts. Jean carefully picked her sweets. She had her eyes on a cream cheesecake, and when she extended her hands to take it, a man came in and snatched the cake before her. She looked at the man and the man looked at her with a smile. "Ms. Lawrence." Jean smiled politely at the man. "My master is allergic to chocolate, so," Teddy sounded courteous. Jean nodded and was not concerned about the cake she lost. She held George's hand and went over to the other side. She chose all the cakes with cream on them and gave them to George. "Don't choke yourself." "You're not eating?" the boy asked. "I'm not hungry." George was still growing and he skipped dinner because they had to attend this charity ball. Therefore, Jean picked all the cakes with cream for him. George munched on the creamy cakes quietly as Jean accompanied him. Then, Thetis came to her with a vexed look. "You came and you didn't come to me. My son is hungry." Thetis looked askance at George. "Why did you bring him here? Know your place. Your son shouldn't be here to embarrass me. If you think I'm embarrassing you, you can just ignore me for the entire night, Mr. Locke." "Jean. Don't challenge my patience. Be grateful that I agreed to marry you, so stop trying to act innocent in front of me." Thetis reacted to her words bitterly. "Really?" Jean said softly, but there was a hint of gloom in between the lines. "Come find me when you're done. And keep your arrogance away. Someone like you doesn't have the right to be arrogant." Thetis then left angrily. Jean barely reacted to it. George continued munching his cakes. Teddy, on the other hand, felt a little awkward because he saw the whole incident and heard things that he should not. It was then he accidentally locked eyes with Jean. Panicked, he quickly explained, My master hasn't had dinner. I'm here for more cakes." Jean simply nodded. She looked at George. "Had enough?" "Yeah. I want to go to the washroom." "I'll go with you." Jean held George's hand and headed to the washroom. Teddy watched as Jean walked away. As far as he remembered, Jean was never this calm or cold. Something must have happened that changed her from the inside. He picked several pastries and returned to Fourth Master Swan. On the way back, he just realized his master usually did not consume so much sweets. "God damn," Jean held George's hand as they walked across the hall. The guests in the venue mostly knew Jean, but none talked to her, as if talking to her would lower their status. Despite her status, her beauty still caught a lot of attention. The two of them walked to the garden, where the bathroom was. George went into the men's room and Jean waited for him outside. A while later, a few girls came out from the ladies' room. "Did you see Fourth Master Swan?" "I did. I can't describe his handsomeness with words anymore. I've never thought a man could be as handsome as him. If I didn't see him with my own eyes, I won't even believe it." They were in awe of Fourth Master Swan's handsome look. One of them lowered her voice and said, "But have you heard about his physical condition? He's so handsome, but there are no women around him." "Really? Or did he hide his girl from the public?" "I heard it from Eden, Fourth Master Swan's nephew. He said his uncle doesn't have anyone." "What a pity. All that handsomeness is going to waste." "God is fair. He got everything but lacked the ability to become a real man. I wonder if it was ED or something went wrong during his puberty. If it's ED, then he can still get it treated, but if it's something wrong with his growth, then it's a pity. Can you imagine a handsome man having the junk of a kid? Jean did not want to be part of the gossip, but for whatever reason, she came out from the corner. Maybe it was the girl's annoying tone that vexed her. Fourth Master Swan's junk is just fine. There's nothing wrong with it, she said. The girls looked at her in confusion. I think it's around, here, this big. Jean started to sign with her hands. The girls got even more confused. One of the girls looked at her in disbelief and asked, how did you know? Jean paused for a moment and answered, wild guess. Wild guess. I supposed a handsome man like him should be at least, workable. Jean tried to make her words sound less ridiculous. The girls looked at her in disdain. However, before they could say a word, a voice came from the dark. Is that so? A cold voice of a man sounded and startled everyone. When the girls turned to the voice, they saw the handsome Fourth Master Swan. The girls were astonished and ran away in shock. Jean watched the girls run. She wanted to follow, but George was still in the men's room. She was forced to stay back and locked eyes with Fourth Master Swan. Things started to get awkward. Fourth Master Swan suddenly said, Ms. Lawrence, do you remember it? There was no emotion on his face when he asked the question, but due to his prestigious status, his presence alone was pressuring and revered. Jean adjusted her breath and forced a smile on her face. What do I remember? As far as I recall, Fourth Master Swan and I aren't even acquaintances. I just don't want you to be misunderstood by those girls. Fourth Master Swan did not answer. He simply stared at her. The air got quiet. Jean blinked nervously as he walked closer to her. She could even feel his breath, that it felt pressuring. Do you think I'm handsome? He asked. His tone sounded softer. I thought that's a widely acknowledged fact. Jean answered. Fourth Master Swan laughed. The way he laughed could capture the hearts of all the girls in the world, and yet it struck fear in Jean. She then heard his charming voice say, no, only you acknowledged that fact. Chapter 12. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Teach the B*TCHA Lesson Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The conversation in the garden got so awkward that it got silenced. It was then a sharp scream came from inside the hall. Jean turned around. She had a feeling that something had happened. She strode inside swiftly. Fourth Master Swan watched her strode in and decided to follow her inside. In the hall, Jean saw her son, George, standing in the middle and was surrounded by people. When Jean strode over, George looked at her with a grievance. Jean was already wondering what took George so long in the men's room, and now it seemed like he had already come out by himself. She looked around and saw Octavia, who also garnered quite the attention to herself. Octavia was hugging her falling dress and she was screaming in panic. Someone had stepped on her dress and caused it to slip off her. Even her nude-color breast pads were exposed, embarrassing her in front of everyone. What's wrong? Damien came over in a hurry. Teed up, this rascal stepped on my dress on purpose. He did it on purpose. Octavia was driven mad by the embarrassment that she could barely keep herself calm. Damien threw a glance at Thetis. Thetis quickly took his jacket off and covered his mother's embarrassment. No, I didn't do it on purpose. I came out of the men's room and wanted to look for my mom. I accidentally ran into Grandma, George explained with teary eyes and an innocent look. Grandma, I really didn't mean it. I'm sorry. He even politely bowed to express his apology. Octavia would never let the boy off with just an apology. She pointed at George and screamed, you ill-educated B*****. Someone send him out immediately. Monica had also just arrived at the charity ball. She was late because her husband, Finn, got delayed by an operation. The scene of her godson being bullied fueled her anger. She wanted to jump in and reason with Octavia, but before she could, Jean had stepped up. "I wonder who's the ill-educated one. Madame Locke, or my son?" Jean said. The emotion in her voice was flat, but it was deterring. Monica was shocked at her friend's reaction. The others were too. Jean stepped up boldly and confronted Octavia. "My son said he didn't do it on purpose and he had already apologized. As an elder, must you be this calculative with a boy? You. Besides, this is a ball for high society and all ladies here know how to maintain their temperament and etiquette. As an elder, Madame Locke shouldn't have allowed a young boy to step on your dress. Are you being careless or was my son being naughty?" "Jean!" Octavia screamed. "You're not even married to my son and you're this arrogant already. Do you mean when I married your son, I could be even more arrogant? Like you? You. Let's take one step back and look at things. I'm your son's fiancée and as my son's future grandmother, you should have been tolerant with a boy and not insult him in public. Madame Locke, if you reacted this way, can I say that you never planned to accept me and my son into your family?" Jean asked. She sounded flat throughout the confrontation and yet her words were pressuring. Octavia was silenced and Damien was shamed in public. Octavia's condition was already an embarrassment and yet Jean criticized his wife in public for overreacting. His wife's silent grievance brought shame to his entire family. Damien reacted bitterly to the criticism. He shouted at Thetis, "Stop embarrassing yourself here, bring your mother away." Thetis glared at Jean before he helped his mother away. Aggrieved, Octavia's eyes got teary but she could not do anything. She simply followed her son away from the crowd. Damien glared at Jean but she barely reacted. Alexander quickly stepped up and said, "Damien, it's just a misunderstanding. He's a kid and a kid tends to be clumsy. Let's calm down and try not to make things worse for both families." Countless eyes were looking at Damien and he was forced to put his grievance and embarrassment aside. "Indeed it's a misunderstanding. We're almost half a century old and we're being calculative with a 6-year-old. It'll be a joke if this gets out." The crowd nodded in agreement. High society was a place of hypocrisy. Deep down, the crowd was just there to watch and take pleasure in people's misfortune, but they had to make themselves look as if they were there to ease the situation or solve the problem. The little commotion faded after a while. BVEC Jean brought George to the side. Monica strode over and called her loudly, "Jean." Jean saw her friend in a black tube dress that showed off her sexiness. Monica was quite pretty. She was skilled in makeup, always energetic, and fashionable. Her slender arms were curled around a man's arm, who was in a gray suit. The man had a pair of glasses that accentuated his politeness. "He's my husband, Finn Jones." Monica introduced her husband to Jean when she noticed her friend was looking at him. Finn blinked and extended his hand for a shake. "Hi. Monica always talks about you. You're more beautiful than rumored." "Nice to meet you," Jean said and shook his hand but kept her distance from the man. Finn pulled his hand back and said politely, "Excuse me. I think I saw my friend there." Monica let go of her husband and watched him walk away. Jean had a glance at him and noticed that he was walking toward Fourth Master Swan. Monica was less perceptive. After her husband left, she said, "Jean. My goodness, I thought your sharp edges were ground blunt over the years. I thought you'd become a tamed pet, but when you lashed out at that old lady, you got me, girl. I was so excited. That woman is foul. Mouthed. I met her a few times during other events and I heard her gossiping about other girls. Yet she acted like she's Saint Mary in front of people, how disgusting. I've always wanted to teach her a lesson but you did that for me tonight." Monica was excited. Jean simply smiled. She had a look at George. George got nervous and averted her gaze, but he accidentally locked eyes with that handsome man with a sharp gaze. George frowned. He disliked the man. He disliked Fourth Master Swan. Chapter 13. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Raising the Bid Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. As the little incident settled down, it was time to move into the main event. The lights in the hall dimmed and a man got up onto the stage with a spotlight on him. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Southampton's charity organizations, I hereby thank you and welcome you to the annual charity ball. All the guests automatically gathered around the stage when the event started. After a quick introduction, the MC-cum-auctioneer started the main event of the night, the auction. The guests at the event were all wealthy and famous, so regardless of the items or their value, every item up for bidding would find its new owner tonight. In name, it was an auction for charity, but frankly speaking, everyone knew it was a forceful donation. Item after item was being bid and won. As the event reached the climax, the MC said, "Lastly, let's welcome our prized item for the night, the sapphire from Queen Elizabeth's crown. It has been around for 80 years and it's still shining brightly today. It has appeared in many auctions abroad and after many turns of events, it ended here in Southampton. A kind gentleman, who wished to remain anonymous, donated this sapphire to us and the starting price is $500,000. And each call is $20,000. The man hit the gavel. $600,000. $620,000. $640,000. $700,000. A voice from the dark raised the price all of a sudden. Jean did not care, but Monica was curious. She turned to the voice and said, "I think it's Eden." Jean remained quiet. Monica added, "I heard that little B** starred is trying to get this piece of rock for Jasmine as a wedding gift." Jean was surprised. "How did you know?" Monica clicked her tongue in disdain. "You have no idea how arrogant your stepsister was. Ever since they fixed their wedding date, she has been showing off to whoever she meets. Everything that Eden did for her was a story that she can boast to her friends. The high society of Southampton isn't large, of course, everyone heard about it." Jean chuckled. She then raised her hand and called, $900,000. Monica was shocked. In fact, not only her but everyone else in the venue turned to Jean in disbelief. The hall's lighting was dimmed, not completely dark. They could see Jean calling the price with her hand raised. Eden reacted bitterly to her call. Jasmine even wore a gloomy look on her face. What's that woman doing? She thought Jean had learned to be smart, so it surprised her when Jean embarrassed Octavia in front of everyone. Was Jean not afraid of Octavia's retaliation after the wedding? Humph. She's as stupid as ever. With that in mind, Eden's voice sounded in her ears. 1 million. 1.2 million. Jean continued to raise the price. 1.4 million. 1.6 million. The gloom on Eden's face was obvious. He turned to Jean and glared at her. Jean received multiple questioning gazes, but she was not concerned. Monica, on the other hand, got nervous. The Jean she knew was as feisty as ever. The almighty queen could never be brought down that easily. She even started to consider throwing all her money in to support Jean if Jean really ran out of money. The thought of Eden losing the bid and the grumpy look on Jasmine gave Monica an adrenaline rush. 1.8 million. Eden squeezed the price out of his clenched teeth. 2.4 million. Jean said. Oh my God, Monica started to count how much money she had in her purse. She did not put any hope in her husband, who was just a poor doctor. How much would a surgeon earn annually? Besides, based on her understanding, Finn would never lend her the money. The man was stingy and calculative and they could barely agree on the same thing. Monica thought of her father. She even started to think of ways to persuade her father to lend her the money. If she acted hard enough or shed a couple of tears, she could get a few $100,000, probably. She inhaled deeply. The hall went quiet. No one raised the price after Jean's $2.4 million. Monica whispered in Jean's ears, "How much money do you have?" "Not a single penny." Monica widened her eyes in shock. She started to rub her hands anxiously. 2.4 million was an astronomical figure even to her. She started to wonder if her father would beat her to death after asking for the money. 2.4 calling once. 2.4 calling twice, 3 million. Eden shouted his last offer. Monica's heart was pounding furiously. She had a glance at Jean and she strongly believed Jean would raise the price again. Jean, however, remained calm and there was not a hint of emotion on her face. Monica cautiously asked, "Are you going to raise the price again?" "Nope. I don't have the money," Jean said. Monica sighed a breath of relief. "Geez, if you don't have the money, why are you raising the price?" The MC on the stage started counting down after Eden's call. 3 million calling once, the hall went quiet. Eden glared at Jean as if he was waiting for a challenge. Jean felt it too, but she was not concerned. She did not raise the price because she wanted the piece of rock. She simply wanted to waste people's money. 3 million calling twice, the hall remained silent. 4.5 million. Just when everyone thought Eden was going to win the bid, a strong voice came from the dark. The charming voice caused everyone's heart to skip a beat. At the moment, everyone turned their attention to Fourth Master Swan. The man wore a cold look for the entire night and it was at this moment, he became the highlight of the event. Eden looked at his uncle in disbelief. Fourth Master Swan did not look at anyone but the stone on the stage. The MC was stunned for a while before he regained his composure. 4.5 million. Is there another offer? Eden dared not go against his uncle and 4.5 million had far exceeded his limit. His limit was actually below 3 million. 4.5 million calling once, 4.5 million calling twice, sold to Fourth Master Swan. Congratulations. The MC hit the gavel excitedly. The staff took the stone and delivered it to Fourth Master Swan. The man had a glance at the stone before Teddy accepted it. He looked at the stone in his hand and then his master. Since when did the master he served become so unusual? Chapter 14. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Jean broke Fourth Master Swan's ordinance. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The charity ball ended with the last item in its new owner's hands. Everyone started to leave the venue. Jean held George's hand as they walked toward the Lawrence family's car. Before she could get into the car, she was forced to a stop. Fourth Master Swan was standing in front of her, with his attendant, Teddy. "Ms. Lawrence," Fourth Master Swan called her. His action caught a lot of attention. The line of cars coming to the entrance to pick up the guests was already long enough and with Fourth Master Swan standing in front, the line got longer. "Yes, Fourth Master Swan. Is there anything?" Jean asked calmly. Fourth Master Swan moved his fingers and Teddy presented a box to Jean. Jean knew that inside the box was the sapphire that Fourth Master Swan had bid with 4.5 million. She looked at him and asked, "What's the meaning of this, Fourth Master Swan?" "For you," the man said with a serious temperament. He was not joking. Jean tightened her lips. The eyes on them increased by the second. "I don't deserve this." "I did nothing," she said. "Back at the garden, thank you for your praise, Ms. Lawrence." Fourth Master Swan curled his lips into a perfect smile. Jean was astonished and could barely react to the situation. Fourth Master Swan thanked her because she had defended his private parts in front of those girls. It seemed like this man was unlike any other. She smiled and said, "I simply stated the truth." "You're too kind." Fourth Master Swan stared at her. The man was not much of a talker. When he stared at someone with full concentration, the person would certainly develop chills. "You don't like it?" he asked with raised brows. "I don't," she said frankly. "You don't?" If she did not like it, why did she raise the price so high earlier? Confused, everyone looked at her, expecting an answer. "I'm just bored and just wanted to test my voice," Jean said nonchalantly. Fourth Master Swan continued to stare at her. He was speechless at her answer. Teddy noticed something strange with his master and believed that his master was already regretting his decision to get the sapphire. A long while later, Fourth Master Swan said, "That's a good voice, Ms. Lawrence." He then turned away and walked off swiftly. Jean saw him off before she went into the car with George. Slowly but certainly, the guests all left the venue. Jasmine got into her car and she was not in a good mood. Everyone saw the interaction between Jean and Fourth Master Swan and she wished she could strangle Jean on the spot. She was already pissed when Jean purposely raised the price just to waste Eden's money. She was okay to lose the sapphire to Fourth Master Swan, but to her surprise, Fourth Master Swan wanted to give it to Jean as a gift. If this got out, she would definitely be embarrassed. Her body was shaking due to anger, but she had to force herself to calm down beside Eden. Eden was not in a good mood either. He had no idea when Jean started to contact his uncle. He believed the two only knew each other just recently. Since Jean just came back to the city 3 days ago, it was almost impossible for her to go after his uncle this quickly. In addition, it was well known that his uncle had no women by his side. It was also impossible that his uncle suddenly fell for Jean. Something must have happened without his knowledge. Eden clenched his fists. "I cannot let Jean go after Uncle Edward. I must make her succumb to me and only to me. I want her to understand that it's suicide to disobey me." Fourth Master Swan was quiet in his car. Teddy had the $4.5 million stone in his hands. It felt heavier than its actual weight. Usually, when his master remained quiet, Teddy would too. The car arrived at the Swan family's residence. The Swan family's residence was a spacious villa equipped with a jungle-like garden. The garden was segregated into different sections and each section had its independent villa. Fourth Master Swan's villa was named Bamboo Garden. The car stopped in front of the villa and Teddy opened the door for his master. Fourth Master Swan came down from the car and strode into his villa. Every segregated garden was luxurious and grand. A single villa in the residence was over 4,000 square feet, let alone the greens and lush that surrounded the building. Teddy had no idea what his master was feeling today. It was strange and he had never encountered a situation like this before. He wisely put the sapphire in his master's room and left. Fourth Master Swan came out from the shower with a loose bathrobe hanging over his shoulders. His fit physique and pronounced abs made him the sexiest man in the city. He had a glance at the sapphire before he went to bed. He laid down and stared at the ceiling. His mind was replaying the scene with that voluptuous body in the silver dress, and no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to get rid of it. The temperature in the room got higher all of a sudden. Teddy knocked on the door before he came in and he saw his master coming out of the showers again. He really had the feeling that his master had lost his mind. When he saw his master's body, even his eyes gleamed. The charms of his master could even enchant a straight man. "Sir, Master Winter is here for you." Fourth Master Swan hummed a reply and Teddy left reverently. A moment later, a frivolous man came into the room. Fourth Master Swan was drying his hair. Knox came in and smelled something unusual in the air. He had a glance at the trash can and spotted used tissue. "Did you play with yourself?" Fourth Master Swan's hand froze for a moment. He tossed the towel aside and said, I'm a man too. I thought you didn't know that. Sometimes, I don't even know if you're human. Knox was a little carried away. Fourth Master Swan turned a blind eye at Knox's excitement. I heard Teddy say you tried to stop Miss Lawrence in the garden earlier. Stop listening to gossip about me, Fourth Master Swan said. Knox rolled his eyes and switched the topic. Here's the information you want on the Locke family. Fourth Master Swan had a glance at the document. Put it there, I'll have a look later. What are you trying to do to the Locke family? It's none of your business. Come on, Edward, you haven't been this normal for a long time, Knox said. That's Uncle Edward to you. Fourth Master Swan had a glance at Knox. He wore a cold look and said, that's just you. I've always been normal. If you're normal, you'll at least have a woman in your room. Go home. I'm tired. Fourth Master Swan wanted Knox out. Do you want me to get you a girl or something? It's different from playing with yourself. You can go play on my behalf. Knox was speechless at the man's reply. He turned around and left. He started to wonder who exactly was Jean Lawrence. What did she do to break Fourth Master Swan's ordinance? Chapter 15. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A powerful comeback translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Jean brought George back to the Lawrence family's manor. Alexander arrived home first. Instead of going back to his room, he sat down in the living hall. Jennifer, Jasmine, and Joshua were there too. Jasmine's eyes were red and puffy as if she had just cried a river. Jean ignored everyone and wanted to go upstairs with George. Hold up! Alexander bellowed. He was so loud that it felt like even the manor trembled. Jean turned around calmly as if she was not startled at all. She asked, yes. Alexander was furious. Do you have any idea what you did earlier? Have you not learned your lesson? Many years have passed but you still never change. You're still reckless. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? I don't know what you're talking about. Jean stared straight into Alexander's eyes. Alexander bolted up and walked toward his daughter. He lifted his hand into the air and wanted to slap Jean on the face. Nervous, George tightened his grip on his mother's hand. Jean barely reacted as she said, slap me and the wedding with the Locke family is over. Alexander's hand froze in mid-air because he was threatened by Jean's words. He had been in the business world for many years and not many things or people were able to provoke him, let alone threats. He glared at Jean and he saw the look on her face, unwilling to back down. With gnashing teeth, Alexander put his hand down and said, you just embarrassed the Locke family in public and you're still thinking about the wedding. The most important thing about business-related weddings is profit. As long as the wedding can bring both families enough value and profit, there's nothing that can't be fixed. Besides, you never asked me if I'm willing to marry Thetis either, Jean said with a scoff. Alexander was silenced by Jean's argument. He did not expect her to understand the meaning of the wedding to this extent. There are a few reasons why I did that to Octavia. First, it's not George's fault and I'm standing up for my son. Second, if I choose to accept her attitude tonight, given Octavia's character, she'll put me in a difficult position when I move in after the wedding. I did what I did because I want the Locke family to know that I'm not someone they can take advantage of. So, why do you think I did something wrong tonight? Jean asked as she stared at her father. Regardless, you shouldn't have embarrassed them in front of the crowd. I didn't start it. She was the one who forced me to do it. Do you think I should just take it silently? Jean raised a brow and she added, or do you think standing up for myself is something wrong? Like what happened 7 years ago, Alexander bellowed, enough. Stop talking about 7 years ago. You deserved it. Jean smirked coldly. Okay. Aside from the Locke family, why did you raise the price during the auction? Alexander continued to interrogate his daughter. Are you trying to tell the public that there's dissension in the family? Are you trying to start a fight with your brother? Lol. If I didn't raise the price, do you think the outsiders will think that our family is loving and peaceful? Everyone knew the real situation when Jasmine barged into my relationship and got me thrown out of the manor. Do you think the masses are stupid? We act in front of others and they'll think that our family is loving and peaceful. Jean. Besides, I did it because I'm trying to give Eden a chance to show how much he loves Jasmine. I simply raised the price, but he still did his best to get the sapphire for Jasmine. People will only regard him as a loving fiancé. Jean suddenly chuckled. Though no one expects Fourth Master Swan to interrupt. Fourth Master Swan's interruption amused her a lot. Sis, what you did tonight affected my relationship with Eden, and yet you're still mocking me. Jasmine grumbled with teary eyes. Jean stared at Jasmine. Please don't call me sis. I don't want to have nightmares later. Jasmine was shocked by the answer. Jean added, if a little auction was enough to affect your relationship with Eden, then the vicious vows and oaths that you took in front of the media will come true. Am I right? Jean. Jasmine shouted. Jennifer pulled her daughter back. That's enough. Stop it. Jasmine wanted to strangle Jean. Jean's beautiful smile remained on her face. It's getting late. I'm going to bed. Good night. She held George's hand and went upstairs while the others looked at her. Jasmine was frustrated and embarrassed. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she grumbled, Dad, Mom, Jean came back to embarrass us all. She's trying to cause trouble, she must be. Alexander was not in a good mood. Enough. She's valuable to us now, so just let her be for the time being. After the wedding, I'll make her pay for what she did. Jasmine turned to Jennifer. Jennifer showed her a profound gaze and it calmed her down. Jasmine switched back to her obedient and soft side and said with a pampering tone, Dad, Jean looks nothing like a Lawrence. She's never a Lawrence. Alexander bellowed. Jasmine was delighted. Now that Jean had returned, Jasmine ought to give her a difficult time. She would never be as merciful as 7 years ago. She swore she would make Jean wish that she was dead. Jean returned to her room with George. She got George his pajamas and told him to prepare for bed. George took his pajamas and said, Mom, you did good tonight, Jean praised. George blinked out of confusion. If you're kind, people will take advantage of you. If you can't tolerate anymore, just retaliate. Jean ruffled the boy's curly hair. George smiled with his mother's assuring support. He never liked to smile, but when he did, he became the cutest boy on earth. Jean wanted to kiss the boy's puffy cheeks, but she pinched them instead. It felt as soft as a baby's bottom. She stared into George's big googly eyes and said, George. We're going to have some rough days ahead of us, Jean said nonchalantly, but the look on her face was serious. George said steadfastly, I'm not afraid. No one can take advantage of you or bully you, not even my dead father. Jean hugged the boy in her arms. The little boy was the reason that she made it through her toughest times. He was the one who gave her hope in her darkest days. There were only a few important people left in her life, George, Monica, and Kingsley. The others could die 1,000 times and she would not even blink. Chapter 16. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Jasmine, embarrassed translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The next morning, while Jean was still sitting on the toilet bowl, she received Monica's call. She answered, Monica, Jean. I'm losing my mind. Oh my God. Monica's furious voice came from the other end of the phone. She sounded like she was suffering a meltdown and was screaming crazily. Dr. Jones made you mad. Jean was rather calm. What? Don't even bring that man into this. He has nothing to do with this. Then, what's wrong? Jasmine, your little B*TCHY stepsister. Did you know what she posted online? What? Jean furrowed her brows. She posted, and I quote, "Thank you, Uncle Edward," with a picture of that sapphire from last night. Oh my God. Is Edward Swan out of his mind? He outbid Eden just to get the sapphire for Jasmine. Ridiculous. Jean remained quiet. Something felt strange and it was not a comfortable feeling. I know I left earlier than you yesterday, but I heard Edward. Fourth Master Swan wanted to give you the sapphire. I didn't even get to ask you about that and it ended up in Jasmine's hand. I said no to the gift. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Monica screamed. I thought it was a rumor. That Edward Swan doesn't react to women. Jean had to move the phone away from the deafening scream. Now that Jasmine has that piece of stone, she'll show it off. She's already aggrandizing what Eden did for her before this, and now with the stone from Fourth Master Swan, it'll only get worse. Just let her do what she wants, Jean said without being concerned. Have you forgotten how that B*TCH snatched your man? How did your father beat you up and toss you out of the house? If I were you, I would F*King kill that B*TCH. Okay, calm down. I'm in the toilet. I'll talk to you later. Jean did not want to talk about Jasmine with Monica while sitting on the toilet bowl. Dealing with Jasmine was only a matter of time. You're still taking a sh*T. I'm dying because of this, I even feel like I'm having a period cramp. Jean could feel Monica's anger through the phone. By the way, Jean had a bad feeling rising from her heart. Do you want me to leak the news about the stone? I'll tell people that Fourth Master Swan gave you the stone but you don't want it, so he gave it to Jasmine. I'm sure Jasmine will surely be pissed and embarrassed by it. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Are you trying to go up against Fourth Master Swan? Jean stopped her friend's ridiculous thought. Monica clenched her teeth tightly. If it could embarrass Jasmine, she would take the risk. There was a crowd when Fourth Master Swan wanted to give me the stone yesterday, and who do you think is audacious enough to deny it today? Jean reminded her friend. Monica was unhappy with her friend dissuading her, but her friend was right. If Monica offended Fourth Master Swan, her family business might go out of business overnight. Jean said, "It's not news that Jasmine is a B*TCH, so let her have her way for a few more days. Don't worry, she won't end well and she'll get what she deserves. Jeannie, you have no idea how much I hate her. The thought of what she did to you back then gives me the urge to strangle her alive." Monica said with gnashing teeth. I know. I have to go now. George is calling me. Jean then hung up the phone. The moment she tapped on the screen, her lips curled into a smirk. It was impossible for Jean to turn a deaf ear at what she heard from Monica. She did not expect Fourth Master Swan to give the sapphire to Jasmine. She inhaled deeply and told herself not to care. Those who were irrelevant could do whatever they wanted and she would not care. She got up from the toilet bowl and started to wash her face. When she came out of the bathroom, her phone rang again. The caller ID showed Monica's name again and it made her frown. She answered the phone. "What's wrong with you, Monica? Who made you mad again?" "Jeannie." "Ha ha ha. I'm laughing my *SS off now. Ha 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 ha." Monica was laughing maniacally on the other end of the phone. Jean rolled her eyes. It had only been a few minutes and Monica's personality went through a drastic change. "Didn't you warn me about offending Fourth Master Swan? I just saw someone posted the news online and it was trending. Someone said that Fourth Master Swan originally wanted to give you the sapphire and you declined it, so it's practically saying Jasmine is taking something that you don't want." I can only imagine the look on her face. It's like a huge slap in her face. Monica was laughing out of control. Jean frowned. Who posted the news? How do I know? But this person must be bold. Monica was not overly concerned about who posted the news. I'm sure I'm not the only one who dislikes Jasmine. Half of the high society despises her. If it wasn't for Eden, no one would even talk to her. Jean had a feeling that something else was happening. Aside from the audacious person who leaked the news, there were many media companies in Southampton, but which one was bold enough to post the news about Fourth Master Swan? Hey, what's wrong? Aren't you happy about this? Monica grumbled because she did not get a response from Jean. No, I'm trying to contain my excitement, Jean said with a smile. She did not care who did it either, as long as it could embarrass Jasmine, it was enough. I'll talk to you later. I have to go follow the news. Monica suddenly hung up the phone. Jean was left speechless while staring at the silent phone. Mom, why are you smiling? George stared at her with his googly eyes. Jean blinked and regained her composure. It's nothing. Go wash up. Okay. George was not someone curious, so he went into the bathroom as told. Meanwhile, on the streets of Southampton, the morning sun shed its warmth and light on the trees by the sideway and cast shadows on the ground. A black car was moving on the busiest street of the city. Teddy was in the passenger seat, checking the messages on his phone. He saw the trends on social media and it made him gasp. He turned around and said, "Sir, someone is talking about you on the internet." Edward looked at his attendant. They say the sapphire that you gave Jasmine is the one Jean declined. Teddy carefully sized up his master's reaction when he informed the news. I'll send someone to deal with it immediately. It's okay, Edward said. Teddy frowned. His master hated being on the trends or headlines, and this was gossip instead of something commemorable. Are you sure you don't want to take any action? Teddy asked cautiously. If we let this culprit go, he or she might get worse next time. Knox can only be that annoying. Master Winter leaked the news. Teddy was in awe. I told him to, Edward said. Teddy was baffled by the answer. He started to believe that his master had lost his mind. Chapter 17. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Negotiating with the Lawrence Family Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. That when Jean brought George downstairs, she saw Jasmine in the living hall with a gloomy look. Her feelings went through a roller coaster ride in just one morning. She received the sapphire from Fourth Master Swan earlier and she was over the moon. She posted on her social media to thank her Uncle Edward, to show that she was a polite and grateful girl. She also used the chance to show off to her friends. Instead of Eden, the sapphire was worth a lot more when it was from Fourth Master Swan. It was a sign that she was accepted by the Swan family and it would boost her status in high society from now on. To her surprise, while she was replying to all the praises and jealous comments, she suddenly saw something trending. Someone revealed that the sapphire was originally a gift for Jean from Fourth Master Swan. Jean declined it, so Fourth Master Swan gave it to her. In other words, she was picking up Jean's trash. What was worse was that she was flaunting the shiny stone a moment ago and now, the stone became her embarrassment. She had never experienced such a turn of events before. The moment she looked up from her phone, she saw Jean. Her embarrassment made her think that Jean was mocking her with a faint smirk. However, Jean did not even spare a glance at her. She was just walking with George. Nonetheless, Jean knew what happened and realized that Jasmine was embarrassed online due to her own stupidity, which made her feel great. Jean! Stop right there! Jasmine shouted. Jean stopped and looked at Jasmine. Are you not embarrassed enough? Do you want me to add fuel to the fire? Who do you think you are, Jean? Jasmine lost control of her patience. Jean's words were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Jasmine vented her anger out by shouting, "Dad threw you out of this house 7 years ago. You're no longer a Lawrence. Do you think you're still the princess of the house? Do you think you're here because Dad wants you to come back? You're here because we're using you as a tool to exchange for more profits for the family. What exactly are you so proud of?" Jean stared at Jasmine blankly. Even George was staring at Jasmine with a less friendly gaze. The boy thought, as expected, everyone in the Lawrence family isn't a good person. Is that so? Jean barely reacted and did not want to care. The nonchalance on Jean's face fueled Jasmine's rage. She shouted at Jean, "You're back because Dad wants you to marry that prick from the Locke family, Thetis Locke. Everyone in the high society knows that he's a piece of sh*t. He's a playboy and he never does anything good. No girl will ever marry him. The reason why Dad agreed to this proposal is because the wedding will bring us a huge sum of funding. You're saying the wedding between Thetis and I is happening because our family is getting funds from the Locke family. It's for $30 million. Do you really think Dad cares about you or your happiness? What a big fat joke." Jasmine cackled. Jean curled her lips into a mocking smirk. She lifted her brows slightly and waited. At the next moment, a deafening shout echoed in the living hall. "Jasmine! What nonsense are you talking about?" It was Jonathan, the head of the family. Jasmine was deeply shaken by the shout. She turned around and saw her grandfather descending an escalator. While Jonathan was too ill to move around the house frequently, Alexander usually went out for a morning jog around this hour with Jennifer. That was why Jasmine lashed out at Jean without holding back. She was shaking as she stared at her grandfather. Jonathan wore a gloomy look. He never liked to smile, so when he got angry or serious, the look on his face was scarier than usual. Jasmine's legs turned to jelly. Before Jasmine could say a word, Jean's eyes suddenly got teary and she said, "Grandfather, I always thought you and Father summoned me back because you guys missed me. The wedding is happening because you want me to live the rest of my life without any worries and concerns. I was deeply grateful for that because I know I'm in no position to negotiate since I have a child. I really thank you and Father for arranging this for me. But now, I really didn't. I don't know." Her eyes got red and teary. She, too, knew how to act. Jean's sobbing and innocent look left Jasmine speechless. Jasmine stuttered, "No, Grandfather, it's not like that. It's not what she said. Jean argued with Dad last night and she knew this was a business marriage, a marriage to bridge two companies together. Enough." Jonathan bellowed. Jasmine was on the brink of breaking into tears. "What has your mother taught you all these years? Where are your manners and temperament?" Jonathan scolded her. Jasmine was under Jennifer's protection since she was young and as a mother, Jennifer protected her from all the scoldings. This was her first time being scolded and it broke her into tears. "Go back to your room. I don't want to see you out here in the next few days," Jonathan said with a commanding tone. Jasmine pursed her lips and tears rolled down her cheeks. She glared at Jean before she ran upstairs. Jean was left alone with Jonathan in the living hall. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a few moments. Jonathan then said, "Put your sobs away. I know what you're thinking." Jean put her pretentious look away and grinned. "Grandfather, you still favor Jasmine, I see." Jonathan wore a cold look. "If I'm the one who talked to you like that, you'd have slapped me. What's wrong with you? Trying to be vengeful, are you?" Jonathan bellowed. Jean chuckled. 7 years ago, when she came back from the Swan family after causing a scene, it was Jonathan's slap that welcomed her home. The slap was so strong that it almost made her deaf. It was impossible for her to forget that slap, even up until today. How could she not be vengeful? Or hold a grudge at her grandfather? She said, "You want me to come back, here I am. You want me to marry Thetis, I said yes. But, if you want me to marry with such insults, Jonathan glared at Jean. Then no. I'm not going to accept the insults. Jean emphasized word by word. What do you want? The union between the Lawrence family and the Locke family is considered the union of two biggest families in Southampton. The profits for both sides are immeasurable. I'm thinking once I marry Thetis, both companies' share prices would surely go up by at least 5%. Besides, Jasmine said the Locke family will give us 30 million, Jean said nonchalantly. The look on Jonathan's face became more bitter. We all know if Jasmine was telling the truth. I myself won't get anything, but I'm bringing a huge profit to the family, Jean said as she stared at Jonathan. She did not sound like she was begging the man to negotiate, but she sounded like she was stating a solid fact. I'm not asking for much. I just want 5% of the company's shares. Outrageous. You can continue dreaming about that. Jonathan declined without a second thought. Then, tell Jasmine to prepare for the wedding instead. Jean. Have you learned your lesson from 7 years ago? Jonathan bellowed again. I actually did, that's why I know I can't rely on anyone other than myself. Think about it. If I don't get an answer from you tomorrow, I'll bring George out of this house, again. Jean then left with George without giving the man a chance to speak. Before she stepped out the door, she paused and turned around. And I mean it. Chapter 18. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Shaming Jasmine in Public Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Jonathan was furious. To anyone in the Lawrence family, the company's shares were much more important than life itself. How could he possibly give the share to an outsider? Later that day, Jonathan called Alexander to his study. The two of them stayed inside for a long time. No one knew what they were talking about. When Alexander came out of the study, the gloom on his face was as dark as the stormy clouds. Jennifer went up to him and asked, Alex, what's wrong? What's wrong? You better ask your dear daughter and ask yourself how you taught her over the years. Alexander was angry. Your daughter lashed out at Jean earlier and even said that the wedding with the Locke family is happening because we're getting 30 million from them. Now, Jean is using it against us and she wants father to give her 5% of the company's shares. Jean is full of herself. How could we possibly give her our company's shares? Not even Joshua had any. Jennifer was shocked. I only have 10%, let alone the boy, Alexander said. What did father say? Jennifer asked out of concern. What else? The wedding is around the corner. We can't turn down the deal now, Alexander said with gnashing teeth. He wished he could strangle Jean with his bare hands. Father said yes. How could he say yes? If we agree to give Jean the shares this time, she'll ask for more. Jennifer was in disbelief. Or else you'll have to tell Jasmine to marry Thetis instead. Alexander said. Jennifer was silenced. That girl. What's wrong with her? She's always so tender and kind, why must she lash out at Jean like that? Alexander could barely contain his anger. It must be Jean who made her angry. Jasmine has always been a kind girl, but Jean has been too much lately. You better watch Jasmine. Don't let her cause any more trouble before the wedding happens. I'll let her off this time, but there won't be a next time. Once Jean's wedding is over, I'll make her give us back the shares that she asked for. Alexander said angrily. Jennifer remained quiet. Alexander was already furious. Talking more would only make him angrier. Jennifer squinted her eyes. She thought she could let Jean be arrogant for a while since the wedding would mark the end of her life, but now, things had changed. She could no longer let Jean have it her way. On the same night, Jean received 5% of the company's shares from Jonathan. Everyone else was in the house. When she received the agreement from Jonathan, Jean's smile became as bright as the sun. The brighter her smile, the angrier Jasmine became. She wanted to rip those lips off Jean's face. She strongly believed it was all Jean's evil plans. Jean agreed to come back to marry Thetis just so she could erect an image of an obedient girl, but she was planning something in the dark. Jasmine suspected that Jean was using her in the dark and lured her to reveal the truth. With that, Jean would have the leverage to negotiate with Jonathan. Jasmine pressed her lips tightly. Jean, I want you to know the shares aren't given to you without a cost, Jonathan voiced his threats. Don't worry. I know what to do now that I have the shares. Good. Grandfather, Jean said. Speak. I thank you for the shares, but as far as I remember, you're not the one who insulted me today, she said. Jean. Don't you push it. Don't get over yourself. Jonathan showed an inconceivable look. I just want Jasmine to apologize to me, Jean said frankly. Jasmine was already feeling aggrieved after what had happened, and now, Jean wanted her to apologize. What Jasmine said hurt me, Jean said. Jonathan wore a cold look. Or, do you think Jasmine has the right to simply insult me? Jasmine. Apologize to your sister, Jonathan commanded. Jasmine was going crazy. She did not know why she must apologize to Jean. Apologize. Jonathan bellowed. Jasmine was shaken once again. Even Jennifer tossed a meaningful gaze at her, signaling her to obey her grandfather. Jasmine wanted to kill Jean if she could. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she muttered, I'm sorry. Jean raised a brow. What did you say? I didn't hear you. You're too soft. Jasmine glared at Jean, but Jean simply smiled at her. Jasmine clenched her teeth and shouted, I'm sorry. Jean widened her smile. It's okay. Jasmine continued to glare at Jean. She had never felt so aggrieved in her life before. A little advice, Jasmine. As someone from a wealthy family, you must know what you should say and what you shouldn't. Try to understand that, or else when you go out, people will think that you lack the education, though it's true. Jean paused for a moment. She then added, on second thought, you're not exactly a princess, at most a peasant who has gotten power. I guess the high society is a little more tolerant to peasants. Jasmine could barely control her anger. It was her mother who held her back. Shut it. Jennifer said. Mom, Jasmine stared at her mother. She could no longer endure the insults from Jean. Jennifer held Jasmine back and showed a smile at Jonathan. Dad, I'll take Jasmine back to her room. Jonathan nodded with a bitter look. Jean watched as Jennifer took Jasmine away. She then said, Grandfather, Father, I'll be going as well. Jonathan hummed a reply. Jean left the study and returned to her room. George was playing on his computer. His fingers were moving across the keyboard nimbly and swiftly. Jean did not disturb her son's work. She sat on the armchair in a delighted mood and pulled out her phone to scroll through the news of Southampton. Fourth Master Swan's news was still trending since morning. It seemed like the people of this city were very interested in the man. She had a few scrolls before her phone rang. She had no idea how many times Monica had to call her in a day. Monica, it was a little noisy on the other side of the phone. Monica said, Jean. Holy sh*t. Monica was never a lady. She practiced high society etiquette but never used them. Guess who I just saw in the club? Dr. Jones. Why are you talking about him? Monica was vexed. Jean chuckled. I saw Thetis, that prick. What the hell, man, you guys are engaged and he's still hugging two girls in his arms and dancing on the floor. What the f***ck? Are you coming down here to catch him in the act? Monica questioned her friend. I'll pass, Jean rejected the thought. She had nothing to do with Thetis anyway. Why would she want to waste her time on someone irrelevant to her plan? Chapter 19. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Monica's Complex Feeling Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. No. You guys are going to be husband and wife soon and you're not even angry that he's clubbing with other girls. I mean, I won't marry him, Jean said. But, no buts. Jean did not want to dwell on the topic. She switched the topic and said, by the way, why are you in a club? You're married. Shouldn't you be a good wife and be with your husband at this hour? A good wife. The marriage between me and Finn is just on paper. We have our own lives, don't tell me to be a good lady. Besides, he's having more fun than me. What happened between you two? Jean raised a brow. Jean knew nothing about Monica's marriage. What? Monica patronized her. I clearly remember when you were in college, you called me and told me you've fallen for someone at first sight. Finn ticked every box of your ideal man and you loved him with your heart. Everyone in Southampton knows you're the one who chases after him instead of the other way around. I was naive back then. So, you just broke up with him. Monica simply hummed a reply. So, what happened? Why did you break up with him? There's nothing I can say about it, Monica stammered. Monica. Come on. It's almost the same with you and Eden back then. You cheated on him. Jean blurted. Come on. What the hell, Jean? Do I look like a horny slut to you? Am I that cheap in your eyes? Monica was agitated. Then why did you marry him in the end? Jean asked. It's anything but love reignited. Monica, okay, stop it. Finn and I are just husband and wife on the paper. We're going to have a divorce sooner or later, Monica said, but unwilling to reveal the details. I think Finn is quite okay. There must be some misunderstanding between you two, you saw him a few times and you think he's quite okay. Don't let that handsome face lie to you. I was deceived by his polite looks. I thought he was timid and loyal, but he's a piece of sh*t. A prick. I'd rather fall in love with any other man in the world than loving him again. Jean wanted to console her friend, but Monica lost the interest to continue. Fine. If you don't want to come, I'll go have a drink myself. Try to control yourself, okay? I'm not free. Go to sleep. Tell my godson I'll bring him to a theme park when I'm free. The call then ended abruptly. Jean stared at her darkened phone with deep thoughts. It was her first meeting with Finn during the charity ball last night. However, a few years ago, she received a call from an unregistered number and it turned out to be the man. During that call, Finn was quiet for a while before he said he got her phone number from Monica's phone. He even said that he did not want to call her or trouble her since she was abroad at that time. Jean could tell from Finn's tone that the man went through a lot of struggles to have the resolution to call her. He should not be a man who preferred to trouble people with his personal matters. She's avoiding me. I don't know what to do, so I decided to call you. Can you please tell Monica that I'm waiting for her in front of her house? I really love her. Jean had no idea what happened back then. All she knew was that Finn was telling her with a sobbing tone, so she agreed to help. She called Monica after that, but Monica did not pick up. She tried calling for a whole day, but it was still fruitless. Due to the time difference, she decided to call Monica on the second day, but before she could, she received another call from Finn again. Thank you, but you don't have to call her anymore. And please don't tell her that I called you before. It was just a night, but his tone had changed drastically, as if he regarded Monica as a stranger. What happened next was that Monica announced their breakup, but then they ended up married. Jean clearly remembered that Monica had a few boyfriends after the breakup, but she did not have the time to spare her energy to follow up on the matter back then. Now, she had no idea what she missed. The problem with Monica's love life was not that complicated either. The woman was sitting at the bar, drinking her cocktail. She broke up with her ex-boyfriend and got married to her ex-boyfriend again. As for her ex-boyfriend, Monica chugged down the entire glass of cocktail. She paid and left the club. It was rare for her to go home this early. She did not want to go back to that man. The man's disciplined lifestyle and boring approach to things drove her crazy. She did not want to live like a machine. Fortunately, a few years ago, Finn cheated on her. She wandered her way to the taxi and a while later, she returned to Finn's mansion. Monica's father bought the mansion but the place was under Finn's name. She had no idea why her old man wanted to do that in the first place. How could he treat his son-in-law better than his own daughter? She put her finger on the fingerprint lock and when she opened the door, she knew the man was already asleep. It was not even 11 o'clock at night. Slightly tipsy, she wandered her way to the bedroom. When she went in, she saw a naked man before her. She stared at him and he looked at her. A few seconds later, Finn, casually and boldly, tied the towel over his waist. "Have you seen enough?" Monica regained her composure and her face blushed. "There's nothing for me to see," she said in disdain. "Your room is next door." "Don't always barge into my room when you're drunk," Finn said coldly. Monica rolled her eyes. She did not walk into the wrong room on purpose. "When are we going to get a divorce?" she asked. "When do you want to get a divorce?" he asked. "What? You think I'm too afraid to get a divorce?" "No. What are you even afraid of? You're fearless. You kissed another man right after a breakup. What else can you possibly be afraid of?" "Yeah. At least it's after a breakup. It's better than some prick who cheated during a relationship." Finn glared at her. "Speaking of which, it's been a while since I saw that girl here sleeping with you. What's wrong? Fed up with her already?" Monica teased. "Get out." Finn suddenly got angry. Monica wore a bitter look. She turned around and slammed the door to a close. She returned to her own room and collapsed on her spacious bed. "That prick. I'll divorce him sooner or later." She squinted her eyes. Her phone suddenly buzzed. She had a glance at the notification. "Monica, did you know that Michael is coming back next week?" Michael. Michael Ross. Michael was none other than her ex-boyfriend. Chapter 20. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fourth Master Swan, My Mother and I Don't Like You Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Back at the Lawrence family's manor, Jean made another call after Monica hung up on her. "What a surprise that you called me." A teasing and sly voice came from the other end of the call. "I want some eyes on Thetis Locke and I need some pictures of him," Jean said. "Sure," the voice answered. "And I want you to hasten the transfer to Southampton." "How fast are we talking about?" "A week." "You overestimated me. I just received the Lawrence family's company shares of 5% just now." Jean was not in a negotiating mood. "Great. Good job." The man was not stingy with his praise. "Keep in touch." "Wait." Before Jean hung up the phone, the man held back. Jean hummed. "I heard that you met Fourth Master Swan during last night's charity ball." "You got the news already?" Jean ridiculed. "Stay away from him," the man said seriously. "I know. He's not a good man. Neither are you." The man on the other end of the phone was silenced. "At least I'm good to you. That's why I'm still working for you." "Jean, the man sounded moved. "That's it. I know what you want to say." Jean stopped the man immediately. The man chuckled. "Hee, good girl." The seemingly meaningless call then ended. George was done with his work. He had a look at his mother and asked, "Kingsley, Jean smiled. I need a little favor from him. George nodded with a hum. Are you going to take a bath? Yeah. Jean then got up and picked some fresh clothes for George. George obediently waddled to the bathroom alone. Jean smiled at the body's cute figure. She really hoped that George could have a normal and fulfilling life. The upcoming week was a peaceful one for the Lawrence family. Jasmine might hate Jean, but because Alexander warned her not to do something rash, the girl did not cross the line. All she wished for was Jean to marry the prick, Thetis, and get the money from the Locke family. After that, she could come up with 1,000 ways to torture Jean. She strongly believed she could make Jean wish that she was dead instead. Moreover, her wedding with Eden was also around the corner. They were already preparing for the event, so she forced herself to forget Jean for the time being and focus on the preparation. During Jonathan's 78th birthday, some guests were invited to the manor for dinner. It originally started as a small gathering but ended up with all the nobles and blue bloods at their door. The guests claimed that they were there to celebrate Old Master Lawrence's birthday, but they were actually there to win favors because the Lawrence family would soon be in laws with the Swan family. The birthday even attracted a huge crowd to the manor. Fortunately, the place was big enough to house 100+ guests, and it made the spacious manor a little more lively than usual. When Jean brought George downstairs, there was already a crowd in the living hall. Everyone in the Lawrence family was talking to the guests, welcoming them, except for Jean. She was not fond of socializing or mingling either, so she brought George out to the garden. There were also guests in the garden but none talked to her, so she simply ignored them. She brought George to a quiet corner. Jean. An angry voice of a man sounded behind her. Jean turned around and saw Thetis. He bellowed, I came all the way here and you didn't even come to invite me into the house. Jean smirked. I didn't even hold you responsible for what happened to my mother the other day. Try to behave yourself today. Thetis threatened her. How do you want me to behave, Second Master Locke? Jean asked. Be attentive, listen to what I say and don't embarrass me. Jean remained silent. The anger on Thetis' face grew. Did you hear me? Jean nodded softly. Yes. Now, come with me to go greet your grandfather. A slight pause later, Jean looked at George and said, take a walk. I'll be right back. George nodded. Jean followed Thetis away. George saw them off before he wanted to take a stroll around the garden. Before he could take his first step, a familiar voice of a man came from behind. Your name is George. George turned around and found Fourth Master Swan standing at the pavilion behind him. He had no idea when the man appeared. He stared at the man with puffy cheeks. I'm Edward Swan, the man introduced himself. Teddy, who was just beside Edward, believed that his master had been acting strange lately. By right, Old Master Lawrence's birthday should be attended by Eden's father. Why would Fourth Master Swan attend instead? Even after he arrived at the manor, he did not talk to anyone and came straight to the pavilion. He seemed to be waiting for someone. Could it be that Fourth Master Swan is waiting for this kid? It was Teddy's first time listening to his master introducing himself this solemnly, and yet the kid barely reacted. You want candy? Edward pulled out a lollipop from his jacket pocket. Teddy was baffled by his master's action. Is he trying to bribe the kid? As far as he knew, his master hated children. Even Third Master Swan's children dared not approach their uncle. My teeth are growing. My mom said having too much candy will give me cavities. George declined the offer. Is that so? Edward curled his lips into a grin. He put the lollipop back into his pocket and said, This is my first time at your house. Can you please give me a tour around? This isn't my house, George said. Edward looked rather surprised. My mom said this isn't our house. This is just where we're staying temporarily, the boy explained. Edward nodded. Still, you know the place better than me. This place is so big, I'm afraid that I might get lost. If you get lost, you can ask the servants for directions. You don't seem to like me, Edward said with a raised brow. George nodded. I really don't like you. Edward was a little stunned. Teddy was sweating nervously. This brat is really bold. Not only me. My mom doesn't like you either, George added. Edward stared at the boy blankly. He saw the seriousness on the boy's face when he expressed his hatred. For a moment there, it felt like the world went silent around Edward. A while later, Edward smiled, but it was more of a complicated smile than a bright one. Teddy had been by his master's side for many years and even he had no idea what the smile meant. Well then, excuse me, Edward said. He then turned around and left, just like that. Teddy was stunned on the spot for a few seconds before he nervously caught up to his master. What's wrong with Fourth Master Swan lately?